I'm finally getting around to writing this down, which is something I've thought about doing for almost 2 years now. I was in my late 20s at the time, working a pretty standard office job and mostly keeping to myself. It started a few months after someone new joined the team, and honestly at first I didn't think much of it when I noticed some similarities in our days. We just seemed to fall into the same rhythms, and I figured he was trying to be friendly. But it stuck with me longer than most things do. The Tuesday after he started was when I first really noticed it. I always grab a black coffee, no sugar, from the deli around the corner before work. It's just easier than making it at my desk, and it's a good walk to wake me up. That morning I was waiting in line, and I saw him. Mark, the new guy. He was already at the counter, and he ordered the exact same thing. Black coffee, no sugar. I remember thinking it was funny. A little coincidence. We both worked in accounting. Maybe that was just a generally accountant type of drink. I even smiled at him, and he gave a quick nod back, looking pleased. It happened again the next day, and the day after that. Always the same time, always the same order. It started to feel less like a coincidence, obviously. I started varying my routine, leaving 5 minutes earlier, taking a different street. He'd be there anyway. Sometimes he'd already have the coffee, waiting. Then came the jacket. I'd mentioned to Sarah from marketing last week that I'd been looking for a dark green Barber jacket like the one her husband had. I said they were impossible to find on sale. I hadn't told anyone else. Then, on Friday, Mark showed up wearing a dark green Barber. It fit him perfectly. I just froze. Like someone had hit pause on everything. I think I actually stepped backwards. He caught my eye and just smiled. A wide-open smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was like he was acknowledging something. I told myself he'd been planning to buy one for ages, that it was just another bizarre coincidence. People buy jackets, right? But I walked straight back to my desk and locked my computer. I skipped lunch that day. I started taking the train to work. It was slower, a real pain, but it meant bypassing the deli entirely. For a week, I felt okay. Not good, just less like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I even started to think I'd been overreacting about the jacket. Paranoia, I told myself. Stress from work. Then, on the 7:15 from Maplewood, he was there. Not right next to me, but 2 rows back, reading a book. A first edition of The Name of the Rose, which I'd been searching for months. I'd even mentioned to my sister on the phone how I'd set up an alert on a rare book website. He looked up, saw me looking, and smiled again. That same smile. It felt like a directed beam. I shifted to a different car at the next stop. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The next day, I decided to walk into the office through the back entrance, the one used for deliveries. It added 10 minutes, but it avoided the main lobby, the elevators, any possible chance encounter. As I was unlocking the back door, I heard someone cough, a specific cough, a little rasp at the end. I recognized it immediately. It was Mark. He was leaning against the brick wall holding a package. "Oh, hey," he said casually. "Just dropping something off for accounting. Long walk, isn't it?" He knew. He had to know I was trying to avoid him. It wasn't about the coffee or the jacket anymore. He was testing me. Maybe he was just incredibly observant, a people watcher. Maybe he'd overheard me on the phone, seen me looking at books online. He was probably just trying to make conversation. But the way he was standing there, so prepared. It felt less like coincidence and more like he was anticipating my moves, like he was waiting. I started varying my route home. Not drastically, just small things, different streets, different bus. I even tried biking a couple of times, despite the hills. It felt exhausting, constantly recalculating, always scanning, like I was living inside a maze I'd built myself. I thought if I made my life genuinely unpredictable, he'd stop. It would prove it was just observation, a weird, unsettling hobby. On Tuesday, I decided to work from the public library. No commute, different scenery. I figured I could get a lot done, and it would throw him off completely. I took a back entrance, mostly because I was running late, and there was a farmer's market setting up. As I walked past a stall piled with tomatoes, I saw him. He was buying a bouquet of sunflowers. Sunflowers. My grandmother loved sunflowers. I'd told Sarah from marketing about wanting to get some for my apartment just last week. He saw me, of course, that smile. It didn't even feel like a smile anymore. More like recognition. He nodded, and then he started walking towards the library. I practically ran, found a Carol in the basement, buried myself in research, tried to focus, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced he'd materialized behind me. After a couple of hours, I decided I needed air. I was heading for the exit when I saw the security guard talking to him, pointing towards the cameras. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but it looked intense. The guard was waving his hands, shaking his head. Then Mark pulled something out of his pocket. Looked like a badge, a security badge. Not ours. Something official. I ducked into the bathroom and locked the stall. It was then it hit me. He wasn't just observing me, he was investigating me. He was checking up on my movements. But why was he a private investigator? Had someone hired him? Was this about something I'd done, something from before? That almost made sense. It still didn't explain the jacket or the book, but at least it gave it a shape, a reason. I waited in the stall for 15 minutes, listening for footsteps, before finally making a break for the door. The library was almost empty. He was gone, and the security guard was nowhere to be seen. I tried to go back to normal, really tried. On Wednesday, I went to my usual coffee shop before work. I ordered the same latte and sat at the same table. It felt wrong, like stepping onto a stage already set. I kept looking at the door, expecting him to walk in. He didn't. I finished my coffee, went to work, and forced myself to concentrate. I even took the subway, the same car, the same seat. Nothing. That evening, I decided to change things up completely. I signed up for a pottery class. It was impulsive, something I'd always wanted to try. It was messy and I was terrible at it, but it felt safe. It was distracting. I walked home afterwards, a different route, humming to myself. I was almost feeling normal. Then I saw the sunflowers. Not in a vase, not at a stall, but taped to my apartment door. They were wilted, brown around the edges. I ripped them down, my heart hammering. I called the police, explained about Mark, about the library, about the feeling of being watched. The officer was polite but dismissive, he said. Sounds like a disgruntled coworker, ma'am. Harassment, maybe. We can file a report, but he trailed off. I went inside, checked all the locks, every window. Everything was secure, but the smell of the sunflowers lingered. It wasn't about a private investigator anymore, or some past mistake. It was about control. He wasn't trying to find something out. He was claiming something. My space, my choices. I started thinking about Sarah from marketing. The sunflowers, the book. He wasn't targeting me directly. He was using the things I'd mentioned to other people. He was listening in on conversations. It was Sarah, wasn't it? She'd always seemed a little too friendly, a little too eager to share details with Mark. Maybe they were a team. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate, twisted joke. It felt contained, then manageable. I could talk to Sarah, confront her. I could explain how creepy it was. I texted her. "Hey, everything okay? You seemed a little off yesterday." She replied instantly. "Everything's great. Just a busy week." And then, a second text. "Mark said you were asking about me." The reply from Sarah felt calculated. Not just fast, but waiting. I reread it 12 times. "Mark said you were asking about me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation almost. I blocked her number immediately. Then I blocked Mark's, just for good measure. Even though he'd already blocked me first, it didn't feel like enough. I went through everything again. My phone, my email, my social media. I changed all my passwords. I even turned off location services on my phone, which felt drastic but necessary. It was like suddenly realizing someone had been standing behind you the whole time, even when you were alone. I started noticing things, small things. The barista at the coffee shop, The one with the nose ring had started wearing a scarf exactly like mine, a burgundy knit. I hadn't seen anyone else with one like it, and Mr. Henderson, the elderly gentleman who always walked his poodle past my building, began carrying a book I'd mentioned to a colleague, a biography of Frida Kahlo. I'd said it offhand during lunch. It had to be Sarah. She was collecting details, feeding them to Mark. He was compiling a dossier of my life, a twisted scrapbook. He was proving something, showing Sarah he could do it. It was a power play, a bizarre competition. I started leaving the apartment with a deliberate randomness. Different routes to work, different grocery stores, different parks. I'd pick a random direction and just go. I haven't taken the bus in months. I used to love reading on the bus, but now I walk. Even if it's raining, it's just easier, less predictable. I still jump when someone looks at me too long though, and I haven't bought sunflowers since. Not even the bright yellow ones at the market. It's been 5 years, I think. It feels like a lifetime ago and also just yesterday. I'm finally getting around to writing this because someone asked about subletting recently, and it just stuck with me. It happened about 2 years ago, when I was working a pretty demanding office job and decided to spend a summer traveling through Europe. I needed to cover rent on my place while I was gone, so I listed it online and ended up connecting with someone who seemed normal enough. Honestly, at the time, it all felt pretty straightforward, and I didn't think twice about a few odd little things after I got back. Yeah, so I handed over the keys in mid-June. Let's call him Mark. I barely remember his last name, seemed eager. Not in a creepy way, just really prepared. He had a spreadsheet of everything. He had photos he'd taken of the apartment from the listing, already printed out and cross-referenced with a condition report. It was overkill, honestly. I just wanted to get on the plane. I didn't really think about it again until I got back in August. It was late. The flight was delayed and I was exhausted. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It wasn't bad exactly. It was just cleaner. Like, aggressively clean. I usually let a little dust gather. It feels more lived in. This smelled like a hotel room. Then I saw the books. I have this pretty specific arrangement on my bookshelf, organized by color, then size. It's dumb, I know, but it's my dumb and it was completely different. It wasn't messy, not random. Someone had resorted them alphabetically by author, which is just wrong. I figured maybe he was a librarian or something. A neat freak. It was his place for the summer, right? I was too tired to care much. I went to make coffee, and that's when it happened. I was reaching for my favorite mug, the chipped blue one my grandmother gave me, and he was there. Not physically, obviously, just in the doorway. Mark, standing perfectly still, watching me. He didn't say anything, didn't move a muscle. He just looked, and he was smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was assessing. Like he was cataloging my morning routine. I froze. I couldn't breathe. He blinked, and then he just turned and walked back down the hall. I locked myself in the bathroom for a good 10 minutes. Probably just jet lag, right? I was imagining things. He was probably just being polite, checking if I was settled. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the building, every car horn had me jumping. I kept thinking about that smile. It wasn't a normal greeting. I told myself it must have been the jet lag, the exhaustion, or a trick of the light. I went to work the next day determined to put it out of my head. But then I noticed the coffee. I always buy the cheap stuff, the diner blend. It's terrible, but it gets the job done. When I opened the container, it was good. Like, actually good coffee. Some fancy Colombian roast. I didn't buy that. I definitely didn't. I checked the receipt from my last grocery trip just to be sure. There was no fancy coffee on it. Then it started happening with everything. My worn-out bath mat was replaced with a fluffy new one. The pen I usually use at my desk, always running out of ink, was suddenly smooth and reliable. A book I'd misplaced months ago turned up, neatly placed on my nightstand. It wasn't about fixing things. It was about knowing what needed fixing before I did. I started taking the long way home from work. I used to cut through the park, but I started going around, taking the busier streets. I felt watched, not in a staring at you kind of way, but like I was part of a pattern someone was observing. And then, the mail. A postcard. No message, just a picture of the cafe across the street from my building. I hadn't been to that cafe in months. I hadn't even thought about it. On the back, a single handwritten word, soon. I think he was trying to be friendly. Maybe a little too helpful. Like he was trying to improve my life. He'd seen how stressed I was. Maybe he wanted to make things easier. It was still unsettling, but I started to think it wasn't malicious, just weirdly considerate. But the postcard felt different. I started keeping a notebook, just to write things down, to be sure I wasn't losing it. What I bought at the store, what time I left for work, what I ate for dinner, mundane stuff. It was reassuring, until I read back through it and realized things weren't matching up. I'd written down buying apples on Tuesday, but I distinctly remember needing oranges and getting those instead. Small things at first, then bigger. Yesterday, I was sure I'd locked the deadbolt when I left for work. I always double-check, always. But when I got home, it was unlocked. No sign of forced entry, nothing missing. I checked the notebook. Deadbolt locked, confirmed. I stared at that entry for a long time. It wasn't me writing that, was it? I must be more tired than I thought. Maybe I'd just forgotten to lock it and convinced myself I hadn't. This morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Real, honest-to-God pancakes. I haven't made pancakes in years. I went to the kitchen, and there they were. A perfect stack on a plate, syrup even, and a note. Just one word, written in that same handwriting as the postcard. Enjoy. I called the police. They came, took a statement, but didn't seem to take it seriously. Maybe your neighbor is playing a prank, the officer said with that patronizing smile. They checked for fingerprints, found nothing unusual. I felt ridiculous. Then, as they were leaving, I noticed it. My keys. Not on the hook where I always put them, but on the kitchen counter, next to the plate of pancakes, and they weren't my keys. They were older, different. I didn't recognize them at all. I grabbed my phone, started dialing 911 again, but then the lights flickered and died, and I heard a floorboard creak behind me. The darkness felt thick. Not just a power outage, but like something pressing in. I didn't dare turn around. I just stood there, phone frozen halfway to my ear, listening. The creak came again, closer this time from the hallway. I fumbled for the flashlight on my keychain, clicked it on, and swept the beam across the kitchen. Empty. I backed away slowly, bumping into the table. The plate of pancakes was still there, untouched. I should have eaten one, just to prove something. Prove to whom I didn't know. I checked the back door, the windows all locked. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about getting in. I went back to the counter, ignoring the cold syrup clinging to my fingers. The keys, I picked them up, examined them closely. Old brass, worn teeth, definitely not mine. I ran to my bedroom, rummaged through the drawer where I keep my spare set. They were gone. Both sets, my keys vanished. Maybe the police were right. A prank. A really elaborate, twisted prank. Some college kid trying to scare the new tenant. But why my keys? Why the pancakes? It didn't fit. I started checking everything, wallet, phone, passport, all present, but my favorite mug was different. Not a new mug exactly. It was older. The glaze was cracked in a way mine never was. I distinctly remembered buying that mug at a craft fair 3 years ago. This one looked like it had been around for decades. I threw it in the trash, hard. It shattered, a ridiculous, desperate act. I needed to get out, call someone, anyone. But the phone was dead, completely dead, and when I went to find a charger, the one I always kept by the bed wasn't there. Instead, there was a new one, sleek, silver, a model I'd never seen before, fully charged and plugged into the wall. I charged the phone. Of course, it worked. Full bars, but every contact was gone. Every single one. Years of numbers, names, photos wiped clean. I sat on the floor, staring at the blank screen, trying to remember my mother's number. It was gone. Just vanished. I started to shake. It wasn't a prank. Pranks didn't do this. I tried to rationalize it, a glitch. A massive, catastrophic glitch in the cloud. I'd heard of things like that happening. Data loss, but it felt deliberate, too thorough. I went back to the kitchen. The pancake plate was gone, cleaned like it never happened. And the note was gone too. I started going through everything, room by room, clothes in the closet. A few shirts were different, better quality actually, softer cotton. I didn't remember buying them. Little things. My toothbrush was replaced with an electric one. I'd always hated electric toothbrushes, said they were too aggressive, and my running shoes. My old worn-out pair were gone, replaced by a brand new top-of-the-line model. It was like someone was improving my life, correcting my mistakes. I think, looking back, I thought it was him. The tenant. He'd been in the apartment before me, somehow. Maybe he had a key, had been coming and going unnoticed, replacing things, making adjustments. A weird, obsessive way to prepare for his stay. A control freak, that's what I thought. It made a kind of twisted sense. I haven't run since, not even a little, and I still check the kitchen first thing every morning, just to see what's changed. It's been years, but I do it anyway. I still buy the cheapest, most uncomfortable toothbrush I can find. It feels right. A small act of defiance, I suppose. It's a silly habit, really, but I can't seem to break it. It's just easier this way. It's taken me a long time to even think about writing this down. Honestly, it happened almost 2 years ago, when I was still in my early 20s and sharing a small apartment with a friend after graduating college. We were both just starting out in our careers, trying to navigate being proper adults, and generally kept things pretty routine. At the time, it all seemed incredibly mundane: a leaky faucet, a helpful handyman, a friend who seemed a little tired lately. Nothing that would stick with me for this long. The chipped mug. That's how it started. I think I always used this old, faded blue mug for my morning coffee. It was ridiculous, really. A souvenir from some long-forgotten family vacation, but I liked the weight of it. The way the handle fit my hand one morning. It was just gone. I figured I'd left it at work. Maybe rinsed it and forgotten it in the office kitchen. No big deal. Then there was a new one. Same color, same shape, but perfect. No chips. No fading. It looked brand new. I asked Liam, my roommate, if he'd bought it for me. He just shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, I think I saw one like yours on sale. Thought you might like a replacement." It was nice, I guess. A little too nice. Liam wasn't the gift-giving type, and he definitely wasn't one for noticing details like that. He barely registered what color my socks were. A few days later, I was working from home, and I heard him talking to the handyman, Mr. Henderson. They were in the kitchen, and I mostly tuned it out. Just the usual stuff about the leaky faucet, the sticking window. But then I heard Liam laugh. Not a normal laugh, it was high-pitched, almost forced, and Mr. Henderson said something I caught. "Just making sure everything's to your liking, son." Liam's response was what really got me. He said, and I swear this is true, "Oh, it is. Everything is perfect now." I froze. I was halfway to the fridge and just stopped, holding onto the doorframe. He never talks like that. It felt rehearsed. I backed away slowly, went into my bedroom and locked the door. I told myself he was probably just stressed about work, trying to be agreeable with someone doing him a favor. But the way he said it and that laugh, it didn't sound like Liam at all. I started taking the long way to the bathroom in the mornings. It sounds stupid, I know, but our apartment was small, and the bathroom was right by the kitchen. That meant passing Liam if he was already up. After that conversation, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to hear him say good morning in that tone. It wasn't just the bathroom, though. I started taking different routes through the apartment, avoiding being in the same room as him whenever possible. I'd go out for a walk just to avoid dinner, claiming I had plans with coworkers. He didn't push it, he just nodded. That same unsettlingly agreeable nod. Then the books started. I'm a big reader, always have been. I had this collection of older paperbacks, some with pretty beat-up covers. One day I noticed my copy of 100 Years of Solitude had been replaced. It wasn't just a new copy. It was a special edition, with decal edges and a beautiful cover. I hadn't even known they made a special edition. I asked Liam about it, and he said Mr. Henderson had been asking about my reading habits when he was fixing the window latch. Apparently he was a big Gabriel Garcia Marquez fan and thought I deserved a nice copy. That's when I started to think, maybe Liam was trying to be nice. Maybe he was just trying to do something thoughtful. And Mr. Henderson was just a really enthusiastic guy. It was a stretch, I knew, but it felt better than the alternative. But then I noticed the photographs. Old pictures of me and my family. The ones on the bookshelf replaced with better ones. Sharper, more flattering angles. Pictures I didn't even remember taking, and I hadn't given anyone permission to touch them. That's when the feeling came back. Stronger this time. It wasn't thoughtfulness. It was something else. Something deliberate. Something wrong. It started with small things disappearing, then reappearing in better places. My keys, for instance, I'd leave them on the hook by the door and find them neatly on the kitchen counter, next to my wallet. Annoying. But I figured I was just being absent-minded. Liam must be tidying up, I thought. He'd never been much of a housekeeper before, but maybe he was trying to be more helpful. Then my work bag went missing. I needed a specific file for a meeting, and it wasn't where I always put it. I tore the apartment apart, panicking. Liam found it, of course. It was in the hall closet. He said he'd put it there for safekeeping because he thought I'd left it out. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't a bad smell. Exactly, just different, like lemon polish. But underneath that, something else. Something floral and sickly sweet. It seemed to be strongest in the living room, near the window Mr. Henderson had fixed. I asked Liam if he'd been cleaning, and he said Mr. Henderson had offered to do some dusting while he was here for the leaky faucet. Yesterday, I woke up and couldn't find my glasses. I need my glasses. I practically stumble around blind without them. I searched everywhere. Liam came in, calm as you please, and handed them to me. He said, "You left them on your nightstand, dear." Except I hadn't. I never leave them on the nightstand. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was smiling, that same unsettlingly perfect smile. I asked him where he'd found them. He just shrugged. He said around, I suppose. Then I went to make coffee, and my favorite mug, the chipped blue one my grandmother gave me, was gone. In its place was a brand new, pristine white mug. It was nice, I guess, but it wasn't mine. I just stood there holding it, and suddenly I felt this overwhelming wave of nausea. I think Liam is trying to replace everything I love, like I'm broken and he's trying to fix me with better versions of my life. It's controlling, but maybe he thinks he's helping. I tried to get my mug back. I really did. I spent the whole afternoon looking for it, thinking maybe I just misplaced it, crammed it into a cupboard somewhere during a late-night snack run. It wasn't in the kitchen, not in the cabinets, not in the dishwasher, not even in the trash. I checked the hallway closet, just in case Liam had put it with the work bag. Nothing. Then I went to ask him directly. "Have you seen my blue mug?" I asked. He was in the living room reading. He looked up, that smile again, and said, "Oh, that old thing. It was chipped, you know. I thought I'd gotten rid of it. It was an eyesore." "You what?" He blinked. "I just threw it out, dear. Didn't want you cutting yourself. It was a safety hazard." He gestured to the pristine white mug on the coffee table. "Isn't this one much nicer? It matches the curtains." It wasn't about safety. It was about control, about deciding what was acceptable, what was good enough for me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just turned and walked into the bedroom and sat on the bed. Later, I found it. Not the chipped blue mug, but a box, hidden under the bed. Inside, carefully wrapped in newspaper, was everything. My old sweaters, replaced with newer, softer ones. The book of poetry I loved, replaced with a fancy leather-bound edition. And there, at the bottom, the blue mug, perfectly intact. Liam must be collecting my old things, storing them somewhere. Maybe he thinks he's preserving them like a hobby. Maybe he intends to give them back someday, after he's improved everything enough. It's creepy, but maybe he just wants to make things perfect for me. Then I remembered the photographs, and the glasses, and the work bag, and the smell. It wasn't preservation, it wasn't improvement, it was something else entirely, something that made the back of my neck crawl. I'm not sure what it is, but I can't shake the feeling that he's waiting for something or someone, and that everything he's doing is for them, not for me. I started checking things, not in a frantic tearing the place apart way, but methodically, like an inventory. My shoes, for instance. I had 3 pairs of walking shoes. Now I have 2. The other pair, the comfortable gray ones, just wasn't there. Liam said I must have donated them. Donated them? I haven't donated shoes in years. Then there were the glasses. I need reading glasses, and I always keep a spare pair in the kitchen drawer. They were gone. He got me a new pair, of course. Sleeker, more expensive. These are anti-glare, he said. Much better for reading. It wasn't just the missing things. It was the replacements. Better versions, always. And the way he'd preemptively anticipate a need. I mentioned my back was aching, and suddenly there was a new mattress, an ergonomic chair. He said he just wanted me to be comfortable. I tried to be grateful, I really did. But it felt off, like living in a dollhouse constantly being rearranged. I started avoiding the living room. It was too perfect. To him, I spent more and more time in the bedroom, surrounded by the things that hadn't been touched yet, clinging to the familiar. I think he was trying to help me. Honestly, he'd always been a bit of a fixer, always wanting to improve things. Maybe he just saw me as someone who didn't know what she really wanted, someone who needed guidance. Maybe he thought he was finally giving me the life I deserved. It was a strange thought, but it was easier to accept than the alternative. Now, I always buy duplicates of everything. Toothbrushes, soap, even my favorite tea, just in case. And I never ever let anyone throw anything away. Even chipped mugs. It's been years. It still feels like a habit born of necessity, rather than paranoia.